Hello, I'm Steve. A little about myself. I'm a retired law enforcement officer with 20 years of service. I began my career in the jail, worked the road, and became an investigator. During my career, my training consisted of everything from SWAT to becoming a state certified crime scene technician. I've investigated crimes from thefts to homicides. After retiring and becoming aware of true crime and web sleuths, I started my channel for web sleuths to better understand the perspectives of law enforcement. Not only do we cover true crime, I go out into the field and assist families who have lost loved ones to homicide and their cases are considered cold. Join me as we look and bring attention to these critical cases.
Hello, everyone. I'm glad y'all are able to join us tonight. If you're new to the channel, absolutely welcome. And we'll have a presentation, and I'll be jumping back between the presentation and the chat, as always, now that Mrs. Steve is in Florida taking care of the grandkids. But I appreciate everyone being here. And while you're in chat, be mindful and be respectful of families, mods, and each other. But tonight we're going to be discussing, there's been a lot of issues about the housing arrangements and where Richard Allen's being held in a prison system versus a jail. And, that's probably one of the most frequent questions I receive. What do I think about that? Do I think it's right, fair? And I've explained quite a few times of what if any difference there is between a jail and a prison system. And so I went out and did some research and found some articles. And while I've always had it somewhere in my mind exactly what the differences in jails and prisons were, but I didn't realize the extent and the quality of what can be offered in the two environments. And for the fact that my career, when I first started in the 80s and mid 80s, I went into a county as a jailer, working for a county, and the jail was probably built somewhere in the 20s or 30s. I mean, it was an extremely old jail. If anyone has ever been down, I think it's St. Augustine in Florida, they have the oldest jail in the United States. Well, some of that technology, when I went and visited that museum and saw that, some of that same technology existed in the jail that I worked in. Some of the older sections, the newer sections, of course, had been updated, and I'll show you some images. But some of the old flat bar setback jails, and some of these areas that and that jail was built prior to anyone knowing what a day room was, or activities, or taking them outside. When you was a prisoner back then, you were enclosed and you had a set amount of living space that you shared with others. We had cells that absolutely were meant to be 8-man cells, and it wasn't uncommon to have 10, 11, or 12 people in those cells. We were extremely, which we'll get into that when we get in that presentation. But anyway, that's what we're going to be talking tonight about, some of the advancements and what the difference are in the living spaces. And I'll challenge you to be able to tell the difference between the two after this presentation. But anyway, if you have any information regarding this case, regarding the homicides of Abby and Libby, absolutely make sure that law enforcement has that for the sake of justice, and that everything moves forward smoothly. And hopefully, I know a lot of people are saying that they expect the trial to start in May. I'm surprised, but I don't see it. But I know that they are saying that the judge appears to be sticking by our guns. I don't see it happening, but maybe so. And if so, we'll cover that. But anyway, some of the research, as I went in and I started pulling some of the data of the correctional institutes, and specifically the one in Westville, that first opened in 51. And of course, there's been some upgrades, updates, things that have occurred. I'm not going to read you all of this, but some of like the new facility design allows for expanded medical services, better programming space, and increased educational opportunities to support our continued efforts in reducing recidivism. And barely got that now. But anyway, that with it being a prison, there's certain opportunities for the inmates because that's a long-term facility versus a jail that, although some of the newer jails have a lot of this, but not all of it. They don't. They're not to the extent, and so that's what we're going to be discussing specifically. This is the layout of the prison. It's a huge complex, and with these complexes, you have to understand that once you go into it, doesn't matter if it's a county jail facility, correctional, local type of facility, or it's a state or federal penitentiary, that they all have different classification of inmates. Now, here in Georgia, where our death row is, of course, they have the highest security measures in certain areas. And then there are other areas, not so much, although they're all extremely strict. You know, back in the day when we would go to those areas and would enter into an area that if that area was already occupied by inmates, because they would open doors and let us, but the inmates, upon the door could be opened, they were immediately placed on the walls, facing the walls, and in position. So that, you know, and they knew the routine. And so as you moved through those systems, occasionally when you met up with those inmates that were going from one section to another for whatever reasons, as they were maybe going for the medical or, you know, staging up for being fed or whatever. But there's a lot of these facilities. And as you go to the interview rooms, day rooms, and because inmates now have it a lot better than when I started, I can guarantee you that. And for the fact that we had federal lawsuits that closed the facility I started in, they closed it down, and even welded some areas of the old facility shut. They said, in the meantime, while we're building the new facility, you will not put people in those areas. And so they welded some of them shut. But like I said, that was back in the 80s. I think we got moved into the new facility in the 90s, and it was, you know, something that was absolutely unbelievable that I'd never imagined in my life. And then when I went to other correctional places, I saw that, yes, there were that we were slightly behind, even as we were taking training in those early years of when I was starting my career off in the jail, that people were talking about our jail, because we had probably one of the oldest jails at that time that was still operation. It had certain things in it that absolutely, you know, our isolation room was truly a hole. It was something that and I've got a picture of something similar room to what we had. And that's one of the things, of course, that unfortunately it got abused, and through a lawsuit, it got welded shut, and we were forced to build a new jail. Rightly so, we needed to, because even when you're housed early on during your process of going through the system, you are innocent until proven guilty. Plus, you have different types of offenders. You have a lot of offenders in there that most certainly don't need to be exposed to certain threats and things. And back in the day, we really didn't look at the classification so much. And so we absolutely had people that sometimes were attacked by people that they had no business being in the same part or being exposed to. So it was extremely dangerous back in those days in the 80s. And I've seen some absolutely amazing and brutal assaults and things that would occur in those things. And, you know, back then when I started my career, I worked by myself. I mean, you only had a jailer, and you had somewhere. I think we were only supposed to have 48 to 52 inmates. I think is what it was, our full capacity. Rarely were we under 80 or 85 inmates. Most of the time, we're 120 to 140. And of course, night shift, the shift I started on, working midnight to mornings, it's just one of us. That's all it took, because everybody was locked down. You had the walkways, you had the corridors that you patrolled to make sure and that on the escapes and things. And we had people that would escape because you imagine a jail that was built in the 30s or 40s back in that day, and working at it, 50 years later. There's a lot of things that can be brought into a jail in 50 years that inmates hide, and they work on the bars, and eventually things get shipped in, mailed in. All the stuff you see on TV is true. Things will get into these facilities, and absolutely through any type of illegal activity you can imagine can happen in these facilities. But anyway, some of the description that's about the Indiana Department of Corrections and things that have changed, and everything that they're trying to do to better house the prisoners that are sentenced for long term in the Department of Correction and the prison system, which is different than the jails. Jails are short term. Those are the ones awaiting trial that's going to be there, typically less than a year. Now, we did have certain inmates that would come in from other jurisdictions, that they would hide them for the fact that they may have committed certain crimes, much like Richard Allen, that would not be something that where they could be housed in any area where they could be recognized or known who they were, but they would ship people in under false names, and no one would know who they were other than, of course, the upper administration. But those are few and far between, but certain things like that do occur. And I was surprised that they didn't do that with Richard Allen. If they was going to move him, just do it under a cloak of darkness and keep him that way. But anyway, I went in and typed in what are the differences between a jail and a prison. And there's a lot of articles out there. And like I said, it's second nature to me to understand that, yes, there is a difference between the two. But I didn't realize that with the prison systems, there are certain things that are advantageous for an inmate. You have better medical, you have long-term, better food, kitchen, you have a larger staff, and of course, it's far more structured. When you're talking about smaller departments, they may not have the manpower to make sure everything's taken care of. They may not have, you may have to be transported every time for medical outside the facility, and all that stuff is risk. Plus, you're dealing with inmates in and day out that are going to the courthouse, and a lot of things that go on. And so, but what's the difference between the jails and the prison? And in this article here, and like I said, you go out there and just type in difference between, and you're going to pull up all these different types of articles. But the fundamental difference between a jail and prison is the amount of time someone gets locked up. It's not that it's a different building. It's not that it's a different setup. It's not much of anything. And that jails are more for short-term stays, while prison are longer sentences. And the other variations, like I spoke of, involve how these facilities treat the rights, policies, and day-to-day life of an inmate. But all the inmates have guarantees within the Constitution on how they'll be treated, what will happen. They will get medical, they'll get fed, they'll get protected as best as they can. And some of those things, are automatic. But the issues facing the jails are budget constraints, less developed facilities, inadequate food or medical care. When I first started, we had contracts with retired doctors. They'd come in every few weeks, and they were big on prescribing whatever type of medications that would let the inmates lay back there. And because we didn't have working inmates, and they'd get, you know, laying there, and whatever aches and pains they had, they'd give them their meds. And of course, we had routines about dispensing meds throughout the jail for them, and there were certain routines for that. And but you had a lot of potential of intermixing of criminals back then and the mentally ill. You know, it was nothing that when we knew certain inmates would come in, the other who were highly self motivated to cause self harm, the other inmates, you know, it wasn't nothing for throughout the night for them to start screaming, Joe's done it again, and you go back there and have to cut him down, and and put him in isolation for a while, and make sure everything's okay if he needed medical. But generally, they would take care of the inmates. Work with us. It's absolutely amazing how those technologies and what it is today versus that. But just a different time period, you know, even in this last 40, 50 years from when I first started. And like I said, all these articles, I pulled 3 or 4. They say the same thing. They speak about the same thing, the essentials, what, and you'll see that even in some of the larger local county facilities, they're run just like a prison. But it takes a large population to finance and build one of these facilities. If your county has built a new jail facility, you know the price tag that comes with it. But all right, let me get into the chat before we start going through and reminiscing about some of the old jail technology. This is what I started in over here on the right. Hello, Mojo Rising, Gail. A1, good to see you. Wallflower, CJK, Sensei, CJK. If you have any questions, thank you, A1 Way Street. That's very kind of you. Hello, Olivia, too. But yeah, the what the old jail facilities were versus now, it's just absolutely amazing. Scott Brown, good to see you. Molly, CJK. Is there really a Mrs. Steve? Yes, she's texting me. She's laughing about that now, I guarantee you. Kowalski, good to see you. Wicked, I don't know how Wicked, Manai, I don't know. Anyway, Di, good to see you. Witchcraft, making peanut butter fudge. Don't come in here unless you got enough for everybody. Gail Hurd, Peggy, Melenas. Oh, been waiting for me. 5 cents. And this is true that regardless, you're not going to make everyone happy, and that he should be out on the street bonded out. But the courts have allowed it, and the courts and the attorneys have been able to present their cases of why he should be and where he should be housed, and there's nothing to be argued about that. We can argue it among ourselves day in, day out, and it means absolutely nothing. Wicked. Yeah, someone mentioned peanut butter fudge. Kowalski, bread and water only. When I came along, there was a distinction between working inmates that were put out on the roads. They got 3 meals a day, and ones that were just housed, you only had to feed them twice a day. Although our sheriff fed everyone 3 times a day, regardless. Let's see what's going on. Hello, Ruckus. Ruckus can tell you about the prison system. He has far more, from our discussions, he spent quite a bit of time in those facilities. And yes, Jocelyn, that those repeat offenders word is a tough word to say. Oh, man. But and I don't know what type of facility that Ruckus started his career in. Hopefully he didn't start it in as old as I, but I was fascinated when I went to the jail museum down there in Florida and saw that we had certain cells that were just as antiquated as what they had there. Maria, good to see you. All right. Let me put there. Okay, got that. All right. When I first started, we had certain sections. Now, we had what we considered the new section of the jail. That section did have day room, although they weren't very large. In that part of the jail, each section was meant to house, had three 4-man cells in it. It was meant to house 12 people in each section. We had new right, new left. So we could house 24 there. But of those 24, we never closed them up. They always had access to the day room. And we had this little narrow corridor that circled that whole area. When you went into that corridor, you opened the door behind you that you can see at the end of the hall corridor. And you would walk all the way around through this corridor with the inmates having full access of reaching through the bars. All you had to do is get against a wall. Plus, if you could ever get to wherever the emergency button was, you could have mashed it. But you walk around that corridor, and but if inmates tried anything, now sometimes they would cut themselves out, and they would try. Your biggest worry was that if they were able to cut their way out into the corridor, that they would ambush you. And of course, you didn't carry firearms in that section of the jail. But now, if you push the little magic button that says "Come one, come all," those guys would bring guns, and so the inmates didn't want to risk that. But we did have some escapes that would be able to cut their ways out, and seen it, been there. Absolutely amazing how people can set 12, 14 hours at a time, figure out a way to get out and get out. Absolutely amazing. But this is almost identical to the facility I started, the jail I started at. The area to the right was a large open area. Each of these little entryways you see on the left were little areas where we had 4-man beds. And like I said, you're only supposed, it was designed to hold 24 inmates, but we threw mattresses on the floor, and you could get easily close to 40 people back then. That's another thing that led us eventually to having to build a new facility. And a lot of discontent folks in this type of environment, living that close, sleeping on the floors, on their little mattresses, and with their little blanket, and not having the best of air conditioning, or no air conditioning, just had fans. But they did have heat. But now the old section was even worse than this. This was the new section. This was as good as it got when I started. But this is some of the old technology of the flat bar. And you see the old steel. We had 8 right and 8 left, whereas you're only supposed to have 8 people in these areas, and it looked just like this. Let's see what's going on. Oh, okay. And but whenever these people in this section's 8 right and 8 left, we're supposed to only have like 8 inmates in them. We put 10 or 12 in there, And like I said, led to very, very unhappy prisoners, high risk, and a lot of things would go on. And the biggest threat to you at any one moment is whenever you would be processing, booking people in, and you had to put them in certain sections because you got 8 to 10 men in there when you open the door. And when you open that door, you're exposed. And I was actually at a jail in Metro Atlanta when I had picked up a prisoner, and I heard a big fight behind me and looked, and their jailer had opened a door. And luckily for him and I and all the staff in there, only one of the inmates attempted to escape, grabbed the guard, took him down, and I was able to slam the door shut so no one else could get out. And I was able to negotiate a mutual agreement for him to surrender. But extremely dangerous working in those facilities. I far rather work on the road than in a jail. Hats off to the people that work in those jails, because you got 30 to 40 inmates typically outnumbered to you by yourself, and you have no way of defending yourself other than relying upon the backup officers that will come. Now, this is what we refer to as a hole. We had one of these. We were probably the last one that had an operating hole in the state of Georgia. I'm almost sure of it. But the only difference between this hole and the one we had, our door was solid. It didn't have any air vent. It had a little food tray in it, but it was a solid steel door. And of course, it got welded shut. I think about 1989 or 90 is when it got welded. But the people that were really, really bad, they got put in there. All right, now this is where the testing begins. You've heard Ruckus, myself, you talk to any law enforcement officers, they're going to tell you that what is the difference between a prison jail cell in a modern facility and a jail cell at your local detention center, correction, or local jail, sheriff's office. And you're going to see that I don't have these listed out which are which. And you're not going to be able to tell the difference because all the bedding, all the furnishings, the the toilets, the sinks, everything, the lighting is exactly the same. Doesn't matter if you're in the highest secured prison versus the county jail now. And that's one of the things that absolutely amazed me, that whenever we went and picked up prisoners, prior to us getting our new jail built, you almost had to fight those prisoners to come to our jail. They absolutely hated coming to us, that they would do anything and everything. You almost had to physically fight them to bring them to come to trial. And so it was always absolutely amazing. But, and I don't have these listed. You're going to have to decide, and I did this for a reason, of some of these images that you're going to see of these rooms. Some of them are jails, some of them are the prison system, and there's not. And, some of them are a little bit more modern, but you can see that you have your tables, you have your bed, you'll have some type of lighting, typically to the outside world, maybe. But almost all of them have that. And, but you have a little bit of storage, and you'll have either one or two areas for some of this. Depends on the classification of type of criminal, and certain sections of the facilities of where they would be housed. Now this is what most of our newer section looked like in the jail I worked at. This was our newer section. And but this, you see a lot of these things if you watch the movies, and you see everything from some of the older 80s and 90s jails. You'll see a lot of the makeups looking like this, and that's the way it was back then. And are there still some facilities like this? Probably some holding areas, but that's about it. But yeah, all of them, like I said, some of them's jails, some of them state. And it's hard to tell one from another, and it makes no difference. You have very limited room. Some countries, I think I was reading and during my research that some of the other countries, um, they have by square footage, what's the average? And which there's a lot of facilities out there that have far greater um, areas for these inmates to serve or spend time waiting trial. But you can see that even some of these older technologies, they brought in some rather newer facilities, sinks, toilets. I thought that's an interesting design there. That's a nice layout. Now this is day rooms. That's something that came along that we didn't have uh, anything like this, and multiple tiers and inmates. And these day rooms are the same. Doesn't matter if you and like I say, I don't have which ones are listed as state and which one are listed as county facilities. They all look the same. You that if you meet a certain classification of an inmate, you'll have access to these areas, and one to the other. They all have similar. They now you see that these have TVs and things, and that was one of the things that we that is part of the discipline. That if certain people mess up in certain cell blocks, you just turn off the TVs. Everything gets righted pretty quick because these inmates don't want to, especially even the short term ones. They don't want to spend their day talking to each other and playing cards. But you can see all the day room areas. You know, they all very similar. 50% of these are state, 50% of these are county. And but I just wanted to show y'all that there's really not that much difference between the two. And some of your larger counties will have the medical and have the food. Everything is the same. Doesn't matter if you're serving time there from, but do I think it's that Richard Allen is probably receiving better medical and food at a state facility versus a small county jail? Probably so. And because they also have professionals for the mental issues. And but we'll have to see where it is. But do your own research. But I just wanted to show you that looking at it, you're not going to know the difference. A cell is a cell. All right. Let's see. Junior Johnson, good to see you. Nanar, good to see you. Texas Ranger. You know, some of the food that they get, you know, sometimes it's just a bologna sandwich. It's not much. Maybe a cookie, bologna sandwich, a Jello, uh, and but it's just something to keep them, you know, going. Steve, one bullet in his pocket and 50% full of Otis in one cell. No, now, like I said, we were only supposed to house like 40 something, but no, we always kept um, 80 something to 120 plus in there. And, but now we did have people that met the description of Otis. You could count on the town drunk every weekend. You knew who they were. They would come in every weekend. You knew when the checks came in for whatever reason they got their checks monthly. And absolutely amazing. And anytime they got paid, it went to whatever their addiction was. Olivia, is it likely Rich Allen's being mistreated? I don't believe so. Of course, there's certain, you know, then that's something that you have to look at with these inmates and otherwise. He has contact with outside world. He was able to contact and his um, wife and his mother and say, I'm responsible for the crime. He would be able to do the exact same thing. He didn't call them and say, I'm being, you know, this is what happened. I'm being tortured daily. They got me tied down. They're whatever's happening. He didn't do that. He confessed, So if he can confess, he most certainly could have called for help. And not only that, but other inmates. I've seen inmates get on the phone and call for help for officers that are being assaulted. And so, and inmates, they won't, they'll look out for each other in some capacity through certain relationships and things. And you're not going to be able, if he was being mistreated, you got a house full of prisoners that absolutely, at least 50% of them hate law enforcement. If they were seeing officers mistreating Richard Allen, they would make contact with the outside world and get proof to their attorneys and otherwise, because they want those officers to serve time. They want to destroy an officer's career. And so officers are not going to be able to go out into a facility where you have access and views from other prisoners and mistreat. Now, if that criminal, regardless of what he's in there for, if he acts up and plays the fool and threatens an officer, you're going to get tased, you're going to get sprayed, you're going to get whatever type of physical holds and impact weapons that can be brought to force will come to you. I've seen them. Some of these inmates, and not all these inmates are small people. They're a true cross section of the population. I've arrested men I came up mid chest on, and thinking, oh goodness, this isn't going to go well if he bucks. Anyone have interest in rocks and a poster on the wall? No, they usually used saw. I've seen them take fan motors out of fans, and someone would bring them some type of circular saw blade, and they'd make their own from a fan motor and a skill saw blade, their own little tool to cut through the bars. And they'd get up there and turn the music wide open, scream and holler to cover the cutting. Let's see here. Anar says, do you pronounce the I and die as a long I? I pronounce it as a long I. I hope she does too. Yes, and like I said, there is a lot to be said for the prison systems. And would it bother me whichever way I went if I had a family member or that was being housed? Would it would I be concerned jail versus prison? No, not really. Considering that Constitution protects them all. Hello, Sirius Black. Good to see you. Oh my goodness. Thorazine. Oh, Joe. Joe took a lot of Thorazine. We kept his Thorazine on call. I mean, he had a running prescription even when he wasn't with us. We knew Joe would be back for his Thorazine. Now, yes, the other one we had two, but I'll mispronounce it. But I've seen that. Bill Moser, good to see you. Edward Bowen, good to see you. Candace, good to see you. Molly says, True Crime Web, did your jail or your state have the overcrowding problems like they do today, putting more people in cell? Yes, like I said, we would we bought a bunch of mattresses and just threw them on the floor. But I appreciate everybody being here. Let's see. Do most county jails have commissaries? They do now. When we started, no. Um, uh, Inmates could get certain amount of items brought in on visitation days, and that was it. Of course, work crews and everybody else would smuggle stuff in. But back then, tobacco ruled the day. If you had tobacco products, probably still does, in these jails, all that contraband, it's going to get in there. Just because the inmate's put in jail doesn't mean that his addictions or whatever he has cease to exist when he gets booked in. When he gets booked in, they continue, and they'll do anything to continue those addictions. I love to know yours and Ruckus thoughts on private prisons versus state run. Um, Everything's going privatized. Will we see that? Probably so. With it, because it's so expensive, not only to uh, the taxpayers of housing them, but also when those lawsuits come, and they're going to come. If you're housing prisoners, you're going to get sued. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Been there, done that. Jocelyn, although I'm not security, I do have some experience working in the prisons. Prisons, um, Texas Rangers. Don't think they can pop doors open either. No, the doors and the lock system on those doors is like your deadbolts on your house, but probably 20 times bigger. And the keys, some of our keys probably weighed a quarter of a pound or more because they're big, heavy brass keys. Um, and there's been times that jailers would use their keys as weapons to be able to defend themselves. Kristen, behind the crime door. Good to see you. Glad you're here. Yes, thank you, Mary. Thank you for helping all the families. Yeah, I head out this later this week, and actually, our shows. I probably won't be doing a show. I've got a lot of packing and getting ready over the next couple of days. So our next show will probably be Saturday. Yeah. Yes, mattress on the floor. Absolutely. Now, in the summertime, the floors were absolutely high value because the higher you got up, the the harder it was. Hey, hello, Sherry Faye. Good to see you. And Steph, good to see you. No AC in Georgia is cruel. Nah, we no, they didn't. We had plenty of fans, and they had water. Y'all gonna be putting money on each other's accounts. Oh man! But like I said, we've had inmates attack jailers and even our newest facilities, and where other inmates, while the attack's going on, would be making phone calls, calling 911, telling them trying to get them help. Hello, Paula Lee. Support with staff is here. And see if you got any more questions. Yes, Kristen behind the crime door, and Ruckus did a 10-hour or 11 hours, I guess. She's saying wide open. Um, for Steve, why in the world people are behind being punished, allow TV, weight room, conjugal visits? Some of this is that, especially in the county jails, while you are awaiting trial, you are innocent until proven guilty, and you should have access to, if you can get bonded out, but some people can't get bonded out. So you need the TV as close to what your home environment would be, because you're not, um, uh, you're innocent until proven guilty. So you don't lose all those rights. You have, you know, uh, access to a library, certain literature, things of that nature. Um, Now, some of the weight room stuff, most of the time in all our facilities, uh, while they may get certain activities like basketball, and we had outdoor activities in the new facility. The old facility, they were wherever they were placed. That's where they stayed until they went to trial, and where they stayed until they went to prison. And that's how come they really didn't like our jail. They wanted to go elsewhere, whereas they could go play ball, or they had day rooms where you could play cards, because everything else was that they just played cards on their bunks, and you know, overcrowded. So a lot of fights. But yes, um, the reasons of the weights and all that, I see your point that sometimes, and we even had training when I was going to South Georgia to get some of the training throughout my career, that they would show us certain of the prison facilities where inmates would get out there, and they would practice disarming people with guns. They'd have these little models of sticks and that they would create, and or they would have a little piece, or using some of the weight materials to replicate firearms. And of course, who carries firearms? Cops. But they would practice, and they had video of these criminals on out there in the outdoor weight area, practicing disarming, takedowns, and all of that. Absolutely amazing what some of those career criminals would do. Uh, that does, I mean, now I stayed the down at Forsyth in Georgia, Forsyth there when they built, and they had barracks for us to stay in that they built, and they, uh, not much nicer than this. We had a shower. That's about the only difference on this one. Um, Now, yeah, that was, if you put a shower in that room, that's pretty much what the Forsyth. Some of those they had double beds in them, though they um, and for those. Paula Lee, claustrophobic. Let's see. Yeah, some of these areas are huge day rooms, and you see they have a staff that's even in the day room. Our staff was separated when they built ours. Certain sections of it are isolated, that the staff are never exposed um, to the inmate population at all. Mighty Mag, I missed you. Hey, hello, Mighty Mag. Glad you're here. Yeah, stronger, and they would train. I'm telling you, it's absolutely amazing. Let's see here. Let me get K9 Dream Dog, member for 6 months. You and Mrs. Steve are amazing. Thank you for all you do. Thank you. Appreciate your support. I'll be using that this week when I go on the road. And Shelly Also, sorry late, loving this live. Very interesting. Thank you. Yeah, we in one of my members, we talked about buying an island and shipping certain inmates to just let them have their own country. Yeah, some of those reality shows, they are that. They're reality shows. And you are exactly right. Some of those federal places even have golf courses for their outdoor uh, uh, activities. Absolutely amazing. Thank you, Kristen. That's very nice of you. Yeah, there's not much. I mean, you look at it. Uh, yes, the child predators should get, yes, they should get their own island, one way boat. Shock vest. Now we use shock belts, shock vest, tasers for certain high risk transports to the court system, and use those once they were developed. Early on, we didn't have those. Of course, we didn't have um, some of those technologies they had. You just, you was really prior to some of the later stuff that came along, such as the shock vest. They had belly chains and things of that. But when you get into court and some of these high risk inmates, they can't sit at their defense table all bound up at certain times during the trial, and absolutely cannot be seen by the juries um, being handled that way. And so when the shock belts came along, and we had certain teams, and each person was had a certain duty. You're the man that puts the shock belt on. You're the man that tests, and you instruct the inmate that if you decide to do this in court, this is what's going to happen. And then, of course, you had your, of course, the shock belt being the non-lethal, but on certain inmates, you always, even when they're in trial, you have your non-lethal, and then you have your lethal components of that security team. But it starts with a shock vest. Jail does. Jail sucks. You don't break the law. Yeah. Gail says, have you seen guards wear odinous patches before? No, I never even knew what odinous was. And the facility I was in, they only allowed what was issued by the county is the only thing that you could wear while you're in any of that, regardless if you was jail staff, admin, or on the road or investigations. Of course, when you got into investigations, they gave you a clothing allowance, and where you could buy you whatever type of clothing, but it still had to fit within a certain departmental standard. Amazon. Thank you and Mr. Steve for all you do for families. Absolutely. It's an honor. And I want to thank our community for supporting us and allowing us to go out and do this. I have no idea where the Odin meetings are held and how they, I mean, I don't know. The 37, yes. I've used one of those several times. Used it for breaching walls and for some chemical agents. They've got a lot of munitions now for them that have been developed over the years. Highly effective. Enjoy training. Mighty Mac, Steve, do the court sheriffs have an easier job? Well, Ernst Sheriff's Office, um, Now I understand that there's certain sheriffs that have only jail responsibilities in certain parts of the United States. Other sheriffs have responsibilities from everything from 911, road patrol, investigations. And so you have the differences of certain jurisdictions having sheriffs that are have different job descriptions. But a lot of your older officers, they take over the court systems and the bailiffs and then the transport officers. Whereas certain duties with sheriff's office, warrant service, high risk, all that, SWAT, investigations, the road officers, that is for a younger crowd. And as the officers age up, and if they don't go or their career path isn't into investigations and things, they'll generally head towards the court systems. And that's fine, but it's high risk. And it is a little bit, it's less taxing because you're in a courtroom and judges like nice environments. They like it cold. They're up there sitting on the bench with a robe, and they like their courtrooms nice and comfy. And the environment although it's extremely dangerous, you're still dealing with some very bad people. Hello, Gail. Good to see you. And they still have those programs where you can get whatever type of group and things. And then you had a lot of the churches that would come in. Yeah, the contraband that gets in these places, absolutely amazing. Our federal facilities, better than states, they all generally going to run and they're all going to look the same. It just depends if you've committed federal crimes versus state crimes. But now, and sometimes when these new county facilities are built, they can get classified as a high risk facility. And so that they're able to house certain levels of security threats as far as bad guys. And so sometimes even the feds would bring them into a local facility, and people would serve or be hidden within the general population. And of course, certain security teams would know who those people were. But you don't want to mess with when the feds transport from point A to point B. What you see on TV is sometimes pretty accurate, and especially if there's a helicopter involved. Yeah. Love to Hunt says, it was said Rich Allen's looking much better and more alert, so something going better for him. Yes. And I'm glad that that's going to go. My friend told me the guards were paid so poor they were very easy to bribe to bring stuff in, couldn't make the bills otherwise. And that's probably true. You see it, absolutely. Plus, these inmates, they build relationships. They try to get something. They're con artists, some of them are. And once they are able to lure through whatever ruse a law enforcement officer into owing them, and they have the goods on him, they just up the ante and make them bring more and more. Which general direction are you headed on this trip, if you can say? West. Badger Mama, county jail nurse here. We average approximately 200. I guess is what she was doing. Now, when you say 200, is that 200 inmates housed or 200 inmates seen daily? If it's 200 daily, woo. Jocelyn says 12 guards, usually just one in the infirmary with me, 2 or 3 on the block at a cell. Interesting. You're going to have, and this is something about the prisoners. You're going to have whatever you see in society. You're going to have that within the jail. You're going to have people there that are model prisoners. They're great neighbors to each other. But whatever type of crime, whatever that classification is, it's not like they're high risk. Not everybody in jail is the rabid dog that's running around just looking to, although you do have that, but they're in a separate classification and have certain areas that they're restricted to and handled by certain people versus the general population. Most, but not all inmates yell inappropriate things. And you even have within the different classification of inmates, you'll have some of those inmates that are the bosses and they rule. What they say goes. They have the respect of the others. Hello, Shelley. Robin B. says, good evening, Mr. Steve. Just tuned in. I have a question. When the Delphi Richard Allen, who will decide facilities where the inmate go, who will decide facility where the inmate go? I mean, everyone. Who decides to go to general population or protected custody? There's intake staff that whenever you come in, they may run a criminal history on you, or they may already have it in house. They know everything. If you're a repeat offender, especially on the local county level or city level facility, that you have a file that they keep on you, and so they already know your medical and everything. And but if you're new, there's a process of where certain questions, the booking process, where they try to find out everything about you. Then you're placed in certain cells for observation and otherwise, and it's a continuing evaluation from the time you get there to the time you leave after your sentence. You're constantly being evaluated. You just don't want inmates running amok. Okay, Badger says 200 inmate average. Okay. Push-ups, jumping jacks, old school way. We had inmates that, and I don't know, that they would work out with gallon jugs of water, 8-pound weight. And some of those guys, I mean, like I said, they're very resourceful. Rebel Bell, saying go, don't do the crime if you can't do the time. Wasn't that Beretta, or wasn't that on his show? I think that was him. Send them to the island, one-way boat with hose. Texas Ranger, we had an electric shield if we needed it on a use of force. Oh, we never had that. So they got new stuff out there. It's been a long time since I was in the jail. Like I said, other than I only saw, well, I mean, I was involved in a lot of going in and having to remove troublesome inmates, but I've only witnessed one attempt escape and assaulting a officer in my presence. Yeah, CJ, me and CJ, we live in a bubble. Mighty Mag, in the 50s, don't plan on getting arrested? Absolutely. We had a guy come in with a handcuff key lodged in his throat. Oh, me. Oh, never have to worry about me going to jail. I don't wear stripes, and orange is not my color wheel. What was the sheriff out in Arizona that put them in pink um, back in the day? Oh, walkie talkie. Hey, Steve, been a while. Appreciate it. Thank you for coming in. I've heard about a lot of people having dogs named Odin. I think there's come more from TV and stuff that maybe I've seen that, and I never paid attention to what it was when I saw it on TV. Di says, Jocelyn, have you ever been on jury duty? Mrs. Steve and we routinely, I don't know for whatever reason, I think the judges just like me coming in. So during voir dire, I can, every time they ask you, have you ever been a victim of a crime? I'll raise my hand. And, uh, and so I think they just like hearing me talk about my stories um, because, you know, to get on that jury, they have to know how many times you were victimized. And so I was victimized quite a few times. I had a lot of people trying to hurt me in my 20 years. Oh, man, that happens. Bill Hurd, you know if it's true that Richard Allen has cancer? No, I haven't. I don't know if he's sick or not. I hadn't heard that. Now that's interesting. I've seen some make a pocket inside their cheek to hide razors. That's interesting. Never saw that. I didn't. Nanar said, "Does anyone see the stalk attack guard with can in the car?" Oh, you had building tenders. What was that? And pretty much like Kuhan Luke. How does one become a boss? Some of them are just, like I said, now probably not so much in certain day areas, but inmates, certain people carry their way around just like they do in public. That, you've been out and you've seen people that, hey, I don't want to mess with him. It's just that persona about themselves, the way they carry themselves. And some people have that respect, and it is a aura around them that other inmates respect it. Same in law enforcement, you'll see some of those individuals that you just don't mess with, and it just doesn't go your way. And that's a good rule right here, Jocelyn saying about that. Never trust any of them because you don't know, if they just running a con because they will. They have nothing to do but run a con, and they have all the time in the world to build trust. It's bad. Yeah, Snake Island. There's an island out. There's two Snake Islands. One of them's across in a certain part of the country in war right now, and then another one's down off of South America. Yeah, they got him shackled up, and they keep their hands on him, which rightly so, because you don't want him to throw himself down the steps. Nanar says that found $700, turned it in. Very good. All right. Guys, I've got called up, been here a little bit over an hour. I appreciate everybody being here. Like I said, if you've got anyone that wants to see the difference between a state facility and a county facility, tell them to come on here and look at these and see if they can tell which one's states, which one's county, and you know, the food, the medical. And like I said, the articles, go on there and look it up. And the articles are absolutely more towards that the states are better run, have more options available for the inmates, which is all interesting. But y'all stay safe out there, and we'll see y'all soon, guys. Oh, let me go up here to the start before I get out here. Make sure I got everybody. Want to thank everybody for their memberships. And y'all stay safe, and I'll try to see y'all probably Saturday. And but let me get something I want to close out on. There we go. All right, guys. See y'all later. Stay safe.